Three things are converging right now that most XRP holders are not connecting. The Clarity Act is approaching its final legislative window. XRP's available supply on exchanges just hit its lowest level in 7 years. And Grayscale, one of the most respected names in institutional crypto, just said publicly that a repricing of XRP is coming the moment clarity passes. Today we break down the mathematical necessity behind the XRP supply shock, the escrow endgame, and exactly why the institutional vacuum that is building right now could move faster than anyone expects. This is XRP Verified. Let us get into it. Let us start with something the CEO of Circle said publicly that reframes this entire conversation. Jeremy Allaire stated that literally every financial institution in the world now has an explicit mandate to implement digital assets in some manner. Every financial institution. Not some, not most, everyone. That statement is the macro context for everything we are about to cover. Because when every institution has a mandate to implement digital assets, and the asset with the clearest legal standing, the deepest institutional infrastructure, and the most confirmed settlement partnerships is XRP, the demand equation becomes a mathematical problem rather than a speculation question. Now let us talk about the Clarity Act, because the timeline is tightening and most coverage is missing the most important nuance. Senator Marino confirmed the bill has passed 15-9 bipartisan out of the Senate Banking Committee. That is a significant result. But here is what most people get wrong about the Clarity Act and XRP specifically. The Clarity Act is not for XRP. XRP already has clarity. A federal court ruled it is not a security. The CFTC and SEC collectively defined XRP along with 15 other digital assets as commodities. There is no legal vagueness. There is no ambiguity. XRP is a commodity. Full stop. The Clarity Act is for the traditional financial institutions and banks. They cannot touch XRP at institutional scale without a legal framework that gives their compliance departments certainty. The bill removes the last legal friction point for banks, not for XRP. XRP is already cleared. The banks are the ones waiting. And once they get their green light, the demand for an asset with only 2.5 to 2.8 billion units available on exchanges hits a supply that has not been this thin in 7 years. The supply picture is the part of this story that deserves far more attention than it is getting. XRP's available liquidity on Binance recently hit its lowest level since January 2020. 7 years of liquidity depth. Gone. The available trading supply on centralized exchanges is between 2.5 and 2.8 billion XRP right now. That sounds like a large number until you understand what is lined up on the demand side. 7 spot XRP ETFs are already live in the United States, with over $1.2 billion in total assets under management, and 94 million XRP already locked in custody. At least 13 to 14 more ETF applications are waiting for approval. When those approvals come, each one begins pulling XRP off exchanges and into custody. Institutional market makers sourcing for ETF issuers are already doing this systematically every single day. The supply is not just thin, it is actively contracting. Now add the escrow dimension. David Schwartz confirmed publicly that the XRP escrow can be pre-allocated, meaning the tokens that have not yet been released from escrow can be committed to specific institutional counterparties before they ever hit the open market. If a significant portion of future escrow releases are already spoken for by institutions, the theoretical available supply is even smaller than the exchange data suggests. Grayscale's own representative addressed this directly. He said that clarifying questions around the long-term supply outlook, specifically what happens to the escrow tokens, would have a significant positive effect on price. His paraphrase was direct. If we stop releasing XRP onto the open market, that reprices XRP very quickly. That is not a retail speculator talking. That is the investment director of one of the most institutionally credible digital asset management firms in the world, describing the supply shock in plain language. Canary Capital's Stephen McClurg went further. He described XRP as the rails of the financial system. His exact framing, XRP is the asset that most of Wall Street and most global capital markets understand. It is the rails. That means you could issue stocks, bonds, U.S. Treasury instruments, NASDAQ listings, New York Stock Exchange securities, all on the XRP ledger, which has a built-in decentralized exchange natively embedded in the protocol. And that framing connects directly to what the DTCC is building. The DTCC settles everything for the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ. A significant portion of their $114 trillion annual settlement volume comes from those two exchanges plus the U.S. Treasury market. Their tokenization engine goes live in July for testing and full scale in October. Ripple Prime is confirmed inside that working group. The rails that Wall Street is building its tokenized future on are the same rails XRP settles on. The math writes itself. Now let us address the black swan scenario, because two of the most credible voices in traditional finance are saying the same thing right now, and the crypto market is not pricing it in. Andrew Sorkin stated publicly that a market crash is coming. He cannot tell you when, he cannot tell you how deep, but he is certain it is coming. Hank Paulson, the former U.S. Treasury Secretary, said the same thing with a specific warning. When we hit the wall, it will be vicious. His words, "We need an emergency break-the-glass plan on the shelf and ready to go." Now connect that to what Brianna Madigan, former head of XRP central bank engagement at Ripple, said about market resilience. The goal is for order books to return to normality quickly after a significant systemic event. Speed of recovery, real-time settlement. That is the exact function XRP was engineered to perform. A financial crash does not hurt XRP's thesis. It accelerates it. Because in a crisis, the institutions that need fast final settlement do not have the luxury of waiting 3 to 5 days for correspondent banking. They need settlement in seconds. That is not a feature. That is a necessity. And the only asset legally cleared, institutionally supported, and technically capable of providing it at scale is already in position. Former CFTC Chairman Chris Giancarlo, the man who wrote publicly before the SEC lawsuit even began that XRP was not a security, said something at a conference that should be permanently attached to this conversation. He said that to underpin the US dollar for the next 150 years, you need a digital tokenized commodity backing it on a value protocol with a decentralized ledger. He was asked directly if he knew of one that could do the job. His answer was yes. This is not a random commentator. This is the former chairman of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission and the head of the U.S. Digital Dollar Project. He has no incentive to say yes to something he does not believe. He believes it. And the U.S. government's own bonds, the safest debt instruments in the world, are already being tokenized and settled on the XRP ledger right now through Ondo Finance. The debt of the United States of America on the XRP ledger. That is not speculation. That is a confirmed live deployment. Now let us put the price picture on top of all of this, because the analyst consensus is beginning to shift. A Korean analyst with a strong XRP track record puts the base case target at $5 if price climbs toward the upper boundary of the current channel. The bull case scenario, if XRP breaks above the upper edge of its decade-long channel, similar to its 2018 breakout setup, is $20. The key variable is the Clarity Act. With Clarity passing this summer, the $5 base case becomes the conservative scenario. Without it, the timeline extends, but the thesis does not change. Because XRP's commodity classification, its legal standing, its institutional infrastructure, its DTCC integration, and its supply compression are all real and confirmed, regardless of whether a Senate vote happens in July or later. The destination is not uncertain. Only the speed of arrival varies. Let me bring all of this together. The CEO of Circle says every financial institution on Earth now has a mandate for digital assets. Grayscale says a repricing of XRP is coming when Clarity passes and escrow supply is addressed. Canary Capital says XRP is the rails of the financial system. The DTCC is launching its $114 trillion tokenization engine in July, with Ripple Prime inside the working group. XRP's available supply on exchanges just hit its lowest level in 7 years. Former CFTC Chairman Giancarlo says XRP is the value protocol to underpin the dollar for the next 150 years. Two of the most credible voices in traditional finance are warning of an inevitable market crash that would accelerate, not undermine, XRP's settlement utility. And the Clarity Act is moving toward a Senate floor vote this summer, removing the last legal friction point for institutions that are already convinced but legally constrained. The mathematical necessity of the supply shock is not a theory. It is the inevitable result of multiplying institutional demand against a fixed and contracting supply. Stay informed. Stay patient. Stay positioned. If this video gave you real value today, subscribe to XRP Verified. I cover these developments every single day, so you always know what is happening before the rest of the market figures it out. I will see you in the next one.